do you think about the film?
I liked it. After I went to the cinema to watch it, it came out, I think I gave it an 8.5. But I think at the time, because I went in with literally no expectations at all, like, I wanted to go to the cinema, that was the main thing that was on. I know the director also did Seven Psychopaths, which I liked. So I went in, but I wasn't really expecting anything, so I came out pleasantly surprised. Speaking to other people like my dad, my girlfriend, they weren't the biggest fans of it. They said it was quite plain, but yeah, I think the first hour or the first half an hour is quite slow. You're kind of getting to know the characters a little bit, which, you know, we've seen in his previous films. They are very character heavy, very script heavy. But then as soon as, you know, spoiler alert, the fingers start coming off, that was the game changer for me. That was when I was like hooked and I was like really in it, and I enjoyed it. I thought the script was good. I thought the acting was good. I thought the kind of like the scene, like how they recreated the time period, was very good. So yeah, I was pleasantly surprised, might I say.
Interesting. I had a slightly different reaction. So I really liked the first half. I thought it was very funny, and I mean, I did enjoy the fact, like, obviously it was very comical in the first half, then deteriorated quite quickly into actually some very serious problems. There was just some parts of it that I didn't really understand or didn't really enjoy. So I think the main one for me was the Banshee figure. I just don't really think it was necessary or relevant. And I understand that, like, you know, she's like this figure that everyone views as slightly unorthodox and a bit strange, and that's kind of comical because that's how we view the actual village, and them, it's like a microcosm for how we see them, whereas they all think they're very normal, and she's strange as we think the whole thing is. But I just kind of thought it was a very far-fetched, stretched out way of showing that and doing that, and I think because I didn't know what I was watching when I went to the cinema, and I obviously read the title and I was like, oh, it might be about like sort of the witching like nature of the witches back in the day or things like that, and then it wasn't, and I was a bit not let down, but I was a bit sort of confused about the relevance of that.
So I'm kind of in between Arthur and Harriet. I'm a big fan of Martin McDonagh. I love his films, In Bruges, Seven Psychopaths, and Three Billboards. They're some of my favourite films. So when this came out, it's like week one for me. Not day one, but week one for me. And I found it funny. I found it expressive. And there's a heavy theme of like mental health, which we'll go on to later on, I imagine. But that theme sort of carries on throughout his different films, like In Bruges, that has a very dark theme. Seven Psychopaths is a bit more chaotic and a bit more comedy leaning, but Three Billboards is very heavy with grief, and in this one, yeah, I think it hits all the right notes and it does what it wants to do. And but I kind of agree with you in the sense that I didn't really get the Banshee element. I kind of had to read up on it afterwards.
What did you find?
I sort of struggled. I think the idea is that she kind of controls the island, and she's like the puppet master, I guess.
Yeah, she does that prediction, doesn't she? When she's like, two things will die.
Exactly, yeah. But yeah, when I was watching it, I was a bit confused. But overall, I thought it was funny. I thought the chemistry between Brendan Gleeson and Colin Farrell, it's just good chemistry. They were good in Bruges, and I'm happy that they work together again in this, and I hope they get to work together in future films as well.
Yeah, I just took it quite literally that the woman was just an older version of what they would be like in 10, 20 years now, being on this island, getting more and more mad, getting more and more worn down by life. And that with the mental health side of things, she is just an example of someone who's not looked after themselves and neglected themselves and now has become a pariah. And I could see Colm's character in the future with his one hand walking around the island, super old, kind of like having no friends like she did. I think one of the themes of the film was friendship, and it was quite clear that there was, as well as Podrick, Colin Farrell's character, there were many characters in that film who didn't have any friends, like the older women in the town, and everyone kind of wanted a friend. So to me, kind of similar to In Bruges, which is about male friendship, the theme of the film, to me as well as mental health, was, you know, this is what happens to people when they have no social life and friendships and meaningful relationships. And I think that is why I never took it as a supernatural side to the Banshee. I think a Banshee is just a term for a woman who has no one, and maybe the man was a male Banshee, Colm, by the end of it, because but in a way what redeemed Podrick was that he he opened up to people, and he decided the most important thing was kindness and being selfless to people. And what I loved about the film is that it used comedy as like a way to get everyone into it. I never took it seriously because of the comedy, and I think that allowed me to have that leap of faith with the Banshees.
That was a really interesting way of doing it as well, because I think to start with, when I was watching it, I was like, oh, this is just a comedy, this is just really, because I had no expectations. I was like, this is just a comedy, it's going to be really funny. And then I think because it was so comical at the start, when there was some signs of like, either deteriorating mental health or disrupted friendships, I was like, oh, it doesn't matter, they'll get back together, it's fine, they'll become friends again. And then slowly, obviously, with fingers, it started getting weirder and weirder and weirder, and like, or more and more disturbing in a way. But because it was still done in a comical manner, I was like, oh, it's fine, it doesn't really matter that much. Like, and then at the end, they were burning each other's house down, or he probably was burning Colm's house down, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is crazy. They obviously both have so much going on, and because of the nature of the small like island that they live on, they're both having all these issues. And I think it was very clever, the fact that the start of the film was so funny and so comedic, because it sort of disguised the fact that there was so much mental deterioration going on.
It is interesting with you saying about the inclusion of the female character. I didn't really notice it until you kind of mentioned it, but I do get what you're saying. It was a bit of like a lazy inclusion from the director a little bit. It's like, because the basic plot of the film, there is this small isolated town, and there is a guy who's losing his mind because he's living on this small isolated town, has nothing to do, and that's the main kind of plot, is their friendship. And it kind of seemed like he just whacked in this crazy lady just to spook it out a little bit, rather than there actually being any like, okay, yeah, it definitely like does represent the town in the sense that like people lose their mind there, and you know, if you stay there for too long, then you'll just get carried away with everything. But I do get what you're saying, like, she could have been more relevant to the plot. It's just every now and then she comes in and goes, shh.
I loved her. I really liked the character. To me, the idea behind it is, and I was thinking about this, and this is why I like a film where you go ahead and you think about it for the next few days and you actually try and understand it, because they don't give it to you, the answer in this film, which I loved, is that she kind of represents how I think we become ourselves caricatures and characters by the way we act. So she self-isolates herself and becomes this banshee. She chooses to dress like that. She chooses to be weird like that. Colm chooses to cut his hand off like Vincent van Gogh and like be an artist, be a tortured artist. Like, I think some people think people copy other characters. He's inspired by ancient Greece. He has all of his masks in his house, and he wants to be an artist. He wants to be remembered for the future, and that kind of almost this impulsive, immature way of mental health. I don't think I think it is a taboo to talk about, which I think the director, all his films has been about taboos.
Yeah.
I think that was taboos in this as well. If you have a male character who, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, basically, the Banshee woman with Cole. Like, all these people, they look up to folklore and legends and myths, and then they themselves become legends and myths. It's kind of like this film I watched ages ago with Salma Hayek about the heart, and it's it was about fairy tales, and I felt this probably was inspired by that in a loose way.
I think it's interesting as well to compare the character of Siobhan to the older lady, like the Banshee, because she managed to get out, and she went and she obviously had that library job and she escaped the town. But I thought it was kind of interesting, just in terms of like feminist characters and stuff, that she potentially could have turned into, because she had no friends on the island either. So I guess maybe the discrepancy between the two characters was also saying something kind of interesting, like you can get out of it. It's not necessarily always a self-fulfilling prophecy, like you can escape that sort of life. But
it's interesting as well, because at the start of the film, Siobhan invites the old lady in. She wants to not become friends, but almost wants to welcome her into her home. And then after that, everyone else tries to avoid the woman, but Siobhan's the only kind of person who tries to connect with the woman. And Siobhan's relationship with Colm as well, even though she's a brother of Podrick, or sister of Podrick, Colm still has this relationship with her, and like is never sort of like, he never sort of pushes her away. It's really interesting, those kind of like boundaries, I guess, for his relationships.
I think it's interesting the way the two female characters are basically the complete opposite of each other. So like the Banshee has nobody and has lived there for a long time on her own, and then Siobhan is in the same situation, but obviously, yeah, as you were saying, Colm's still her friend
Yeah.
and doesn't take his grievances out on her, and she's obviously very intelligent and then goes and gets this job. So I think it's interesting the way it's been directed to have, especially when they're in the same room together, these two, potentially the only two like main female characters in the film, and when they're presented together, I think it's an interesting comparison.
I think intelligence was such a main theme of the film, and I think Siobhan was the only truly intelligent character. I think that Colm character's pretended to be intelligent. Obviously he's a great musician and that is a skill, but he used big words, he dismissed, he put Podrick down, and I think that's a sign that truly someone isn't intelligent when they put other people down like that. But Siobhan, on the other hand, I think with art, she was a big reader. She read lots of books, she immersed herself. Yeah. She didn't look at things at a surface value, she was a deep thinker. But I think Colm was like, ooh, that's highbrow, that's interesting, that's elite art, that's Beethoven, that's Bach, that's all the classical composers. Whereas she actually, when she read a book, she actually felt about it and had a personal, intelligent connection to it. And I think it was all, because in Bruges, the word, there's a slur word for it, but I think a lot of this film is about what does it mean to be very, very stupid, or to be semi-moronic, or moronic with Podrick's character.
Speaking of, sorry.
I was going to say, we see that as well highlighted in the pub when Colm and Podrick sort of get into it. And is it Colm, he brings up Picasso.
Mozart.
Yes,
Mozart.
That was it.
In the
Yeah.
1800s.
And he's very, he wants to show off that he's like you said, like highbrow and very intelligent, and then like Siobhan's like, well, actually it's like the wrong era.
He's not smart.
Yeah.
You know, he acts like, it's like we all act like we're smart, but the people who are smart, that it's not an act.
Yeah.
Like it's not a mask like he puts on. Yeah.
And she doesn't parade around her intelligence until she actually needs to.
Yeah.
But Dominic is an interesting character in terms of
the
intelligence. The young boy.
I really liked him because, like, I don't know if you guys have seen, there's a film called 71.
No.
It's basically a film that's set in like Ireland when the whole kind of Northern Ireland war with England was going on with the Great Britain. And he basically plays like a character in that. He's like the bad guy, but not like a proper villain, but basically it's about a British soldier who gets stranded in like a town on the border, and all of his British troops retreat, and he's stranded in this like Irish town. And Dominic plays like a guy who's on the hunt for this soldier, and in this film he's shooting people and he's really cold. So to see him play like the town idiot, I was like, wow, I didn't know you had that side to you. You know what I mean? Because I know him as that role, as that character. So it was very interesting seeing him go from the kind of villain who you're scared of to this kind of innocent town idiot. And he was actually probably my favourite character in the whole film. Yeah. He was my favourite part of the film. Like, there were a couple of lines that he said where I was actually laughing out loud quite hard, which I liked because, like we said before, the comedy kind of allows you to kind of be more immersed in the situation that's going on. So yeah, he was a big plus for me, Dominic. I really liked him.
Do you think anyone in real life is actually a town idiot? Do you think these people exist?
Yes.
I think that's a thing the film's asking us is, are people like Podrick and Dominic, because those were the two town idiots as we saw with Siobhan's conversation in the film. Do those people actually exist? Because to me, I think they were saying in this film, it's not as simple as that.
I think so, because we always, like just from experience, we always know these like characters in pubs, like maybe not town idiots, but I guess like it's just a character, but maybe it's like he's dumb, but there's always those type of wacky and weird people in our lives.
See, I think it's slightly more interesting than that, because obviously he is meant to be like the village idiot, but and Podrick's meant to be slightly sort of on the cusp of that as well.
Yeah.
But both of them,
he's like second. Isn't
he? He's like, I'm not stupid.
Yeah.
But both of them do have moments of intelligence in the film, and I think that's done very deliberately. So Dominic uses the touche at one point, and then everyone's like, what's that? And then he's like, oh, it's French. Which for his character was surprisingly well educated. You know, I don't suspect many French people go to rural Ireland in the 1920s. So I thought like that was done deliberately to show that there's always something else going on, and potentially it might be because of Dominic's like upbringing and his situation at home that he doesn't want to show that side of him. And then the same with Podrick, like he has not masses of like intellectual intelligence, but his emotional intelligence is very high. Like he goes and he's trying to see Colm, and he's like looking out for his sister, and he has a lot of like social interactions that do display a lot of intelligence. So I think it brings up themes of like what is intelligence, whether Dominic's intelligence is being suppressed by the fact obviously he's being abused by his father, and Padraig has emotional intelligence, whereas Colm has like this, as you say, slightly superficial sort of like, I like music and I know who Mozart is intelligence, but it depends what you define as intelligence.
Yeah, I think that's, to me, I got the film no one is really more intelligent than each other at the end of the day, which is a nice thing to think.
Absolutely.
Wow, you guys making me feel so judgmental.
I was
He's
like,
an idiot!
Idiot, and then you guys are
Dominic's
boring.
abuse. I think a big theme of the whole film was families as well, and the family unit. And we saw like this brother-sister relationship, and we also saw the father-son relationship, and they're both different. And and to me, as someone with like Irish heritage, I think it was playing on certain stereotypes of like mammy's boy, with, do you know, Irish people calling their dad daddy. And at first you were like, daddy, daddy, and you just thought he was like really close with his father, but then there's actually abuse beneath that. And I found that infantilization of him is probably what's stunting him, as well as the abuse.
Yeah.
And I think it's like, you never leave the nest.
Yeah.
And it's coddled, like Molly coddled in that kind of rural society where like, the reason why Podrick's not a man is because his sister does everything for him. He's never left home. His parents died, and instead of like getting a job,
he kind of like has to grow up as the film goes on. Like when his sister leaves, he kind of like has to grow up and become a man.
Does he grow up though? He just becomes friends with his donkey.
True.
R.I.P.
He just like for me, I think when his sister leaves, he doesn't really step up. He just kind of capitulates. He just kind of descends into this world of madness where his best friend is a donkey, and he burns down houses, and he tells people to leave the island because their family have died. Like for me, as soon as his sister goes, that's like a turning point in the film where he's just he's just all of his morals. And
I don't think so, because there's still that little bit, like, because he saves the dog from the house. Like, he could have fully lost it and just kept the dog in the house and leave.
But is that showing adulthood?
I think it's showing adolescence. I think it's showing rebellion. So he's doing his crisis, his teenage phase, his rebellion. But then at the end of it, I think he gets through like the storm.
Yeah.
You know, and I do think that's, you know, as a mental health point of view, he doesn't kill himself, and he doesn't chop his hand off either. He doesn't do self-harm. So actually his behaviour in a way, compared to Colm's, is a lot more rational than Colm, who is clearly unravelling.
It's not hard to be more rational than Colm, though, is it?
No, but
I think
he's the least rational guy I've ever seen in my life. If you talk to me one more time, I'm going to chop a finger off. Like,
I think just 4 at once. But I think I think, if anything, this might be slightly controversial of a take. Dominic's potentially, other than obviously Siobhan, Dominic's potentially the most actually adult and intellectual character, because he's the only one that doesn't. He's going through a lot of, you know, abuse and like horrible situations at home, and he doesn't like react by chopping his hands off. He doesn't burn anyone's house down. He doesn't rely on somebody else to look after him. If anything, he's dealing with what he's going through, quite self-sufficient. He is a good friend. He's very emotionally intelligent, and he clearly knows some, like with the touche scene, he clearly knows something about like life. And I think it's really funny, the fact that the village idiot, who is portrayed as being this like very stupid character, and I'm not saying he's not, but when you actually think about it, he's the one that has his life sort of not together, but is not reacting in the way that the two adult men are. I
think it's the male equivalent of like being the village Jezebel, to use an equivalent word, that everyone will judge that person in the village for having loose morals, but actually they might have their life together. And like it's just like we judge lifestyles even today, but especially back then, if you have a slightly different lifestyle to the norm.
We say that though, like when he faces rejection, like he chooses to end his life. Basically, he chooses to end it all. Like, so is that really? It's not immature, but it's like kind of he dealt with that situation differently to how other people in that film dealt with rejection. Not rejection, but So is that really him being like smart, or not being smart, just being above and being smart?
Do we want to discuss like the abuse and like the fiddling and the paedophilia like in this film? Because I think that was something that the director deals with taboo, and then because it's a comedy, he goes over it. And sometimes I kind of felt if I had to change one thing for a film, I think I would make that plot a little bit not bigger, but just develop it slightly, just to kind of pay more attention to it. I don't know, do you think there's an ethical duty or anything?
With regards to the paedophilia aspect of it, what What aspects of the film is?
The fiddling, you know, like the dad.
The policeman.
The policeman fiddling with Dominic.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I must have missed that.
I
part.
think that's
I
very
knew
It was
that
very subtle.
Yeah.
I knew he beat him badly. That was
It
pretty
was a very
obvious.
subtle mention of the fact.
In the pub one.
In the pub, Podrick was like, "Oh, like, and your dad fiddles with you,"
Ah,
and then the policeman
okay.
got very angry. So it was
No one
obviously true.
denied it.
Yeah, and
Ah,
then
see, I
he
must have
apologised
missed
to
that
Dominic
part.
later for bringing it up.
And we saw him naked, and I thought, usually I hate nudity in films, like I'm a very moral person.
Especially if you see
tourist.
this body.
But
That's one
I
you
think
do.
everyone might
But
say a
that-
solid
but that-
no to
yeah,
that
because
one.
it was, let's say, unattractive, unappealing. I thought it was a really good use of nudity, and I think that linked it to the, because you saw him, it's obviously inappropriate. And at first, when I saw that naked body, I didn't make any connection. Kind of, I'm ashamed of myself that, you know, that was inappropriate
Yeah.
to kind of greet your son completely naked like that, genitalia showing at night, and that really actually foreshadowed it.
Mm.
The nudity, the graphic nudity, and I really like that the film showed that in an unflattering light. It was powerful.
Yeah, I didn't really think too much of that, I guess, but I see where you're coming from. I guess it just highlighted how comfortable he is in that household. Like, you can just be that sort of way, I guess.
Do whatever you want.
And like and like his son doesn't sort of react negatively towards it. It's just him.
Yeah.
He's just used to it.
Yeah.
There's an opposite choice to being independent. Like some people like either independent or not self-sufficient. But then there's a third choice really, which is taking out your emotional pain on others and being abusive, which the father, the policeman, does. So like Siobhan's the good one.
Yeah.
Maybe Podrick is a bit. He doesn't grow up.
Yeah.
Perhaps we can argue about that. But then there's a third option, which is the life of the criminal. You know, and that's the way the policeman goes. And I think that film showed it quite well that everyone makes choices in lives, and that's the wrong choice.
I think it was also interesting that the abuse was coming from somebody in a position of authority.
Yeah,
definitely.
So the fact that he was the local policeman.
Yes.
And he had like a young boy or young man, whatever.
Yeah.
And he was abusing him in that way.
Yeah.
It shows that back in the day, potentially in these sort of villages, people with authority could basically do whatever they wanted. And he does not only with the abuse to his son, he like punches a lot of people and is quite violent to a lot of people.
It's the way he sort of refers to the war as well. Like he just like the idea of going to war is like very appealing to him.
He's capitalising it for his own
Yeah,
gain.
like
He's like, oh, I'm gonna go and earn, I can't remember how much it was, like X amount of money. And he was saying to Colm like, oh, you would do it too if you got this amount of money. He's a very fickle character, and I like the fact he was a police officer when he did that.
They subverted religion in that film, so they made jokes at the beginning about paedophilia with the church, kind of just to, because the audience was already thinking it with Ireland, and then it was actually the policeman, as you say. It's actually you're looking, so it's still authority.
Yeah,
but
it's
the
still
audience
slightly
looks to the
different.
wrong place.
Yeah.
And you kind of assume the priest, perhaps.
It's playing on the stereotypes of what you assume.
And but then it's like, look closer to it is someone in the society who's a menace to society.
Yeah, interesting.
As far as like Colm survived, because he seemed very accepting of his fate. He seemed like he didn't mind what happened to him. Like he didn't really express the pain when he cut off his fingers. He just seemed done with life.
I thought like the death was going to be him dying in the fire.
I thought that was
imagine your best form of mental health is going to a priest for confession. And
the priest is a bit
it's just like saying about like all the different types of sins, and he's really, because he's been to the priest before of depression, and it's like I think that is very much a sign of how far we've come, in that if you relied on religion, personally as my like a political view, if you relied on religion as your mental health support, there's no wonder these people actually then descend into becoming banshees and becoming characters, because the church kind of does deal with those characters where it's actually to suffer is to be like Christ is a good thing. It's actually quite idealised. I love the film. I think it should hopefully be nominated for Oscars. I think that's what I would describe for that film. I think Colin Farrell does deserve some sort of nomination. I'd be shocked if there's anyone really much better than him that year. I think he's played a similar character like that before, like an idiot. But I think this time, especially with the animals and things like that, showing the different side of intelligence, that you can be intelligent with because that is an underrated one, is like with children and animals and how you nurture people in their life.
Yeah.
I think he should get one, and I think the script and a lot of other elements I think should be nominated. Even if they don't win, I think they deserve recognition.
I did really enjoy it. Overall, my only main criticism is the role of the Banshee should have been fleshed out.
You wanted to see some witches flying around.
Yeah, I wanted to see some stronger female characters.
But what about Siobhan though?
She was great,
Yeah.
but
She
it
gets off though,
was
doesn't
still
she?
very patriarchal, male-based film, which I understand because in the time it would have been. Just with the title of the film, I kind of
Give me more
I
Banshee.
thought there was going to be more female like roles and more Banshee.
Yeah.
But I feel like,
more Banshee action.
I feel like from what you've said in this conversation, I feel like Colin Farrell's character showed that different side of intelligence that isn't masculine associated, and then Colm's did, and then you kind of see that he's like his sister in his way, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I thought it was a great film and very well acted. I just
going back to the point about it being maybe put like best film, I don't think it reached that. I don't think it's as good. I don't think people will think it's as good as Three Billboards. I mean,
yes.
For me personally, I don't think it's one of his. I don't rate Three Billboards as like higher or as like Seven Psychopaths or In Bruges just because I prefer them. I don't know.
Yeah,
because I think Seven Psychopaths for me was just better for me because it's very chaotic and very like all over the place, and I kind of like that with films. Three Billboards was very raw. I
think Three Billboards. It deserved that Oscar.
Yeah, definitely 100%.
Like immediately deserved it. With Colin Farrell, I think it's. I'm actually proud of an actor because when we saw it, we were like, "Oh, he's tan." You know, like as soon as we saw the film, we saw. But I definitely think he's stretching himself with this film, and I think the same with Brendan Gleeson. I don't think it was an easy acting job, and I think for them to do such a simple story and invest so much of their, even with the director, I think they're just experimenting now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I agree with that. Yeah, I just hope they do more stuff together because it's just such good chemistry between them two and the director himself. And yeah, I just hope they do more stuff together.